Yeah, we thought it was important tonight just to enrich the conversation about transgender experiences in childhood that we put a panel together. So let me just start off, and I'd like to introduce my panel. So on my immediate left is Michelle Sparrow. She's the mother of 2 boys, and when her son Noah came out as transgender, she wanted to connect him to other LGBTQ youth his own age. But she found that in Toronto, there were actually no programs for tweens. And so what do you do when there's a gap? Well, you have to fill it yourself. So Michelle went to Skylark Youth Services. She helped create a tween program for youth and their allies between the ages of 12 and 15. And it actually celebrates its first anniversary this month, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been 1 year. 1 year. Yeah. And this is a place where kids can go. Apparently about 40 kids show up on Fridays. And Michelle herself, she's a librarian. She's also on the board of PFLAG, which is an organization that supports parents who have LGBTQ children. So this is Michelle Sparrow. Next to Michelle, we have Cecilio Escobar. Cecilio is a queer trans Latinx man. He's a video artist, an editor, a technician. He also conducts workshops for faculty at Centennial College on creating a more gender-inclusive environment. He's a member of Inside Out Toronto's LGBTQ Film Festival's programming committee, and he's also working on his next documentary project. It's called Latinx. Well, that's the working title.
Yeah.
You're probably going to change it, so you can tell us. And that's an exploration of intersections between his gender and cultural identity. So we look forward to that, Cecilio. And then Gail Mintz is here. She's a social worker. She has a passion for working with children, adolescents, and families. She works in the Gender-Based Violence Prevention Office at the TDSB. And she's involved in a ton of support work. I can't even mention it all, but just let me mention a few things she does. Facilitates a parent group for gender-independent children from JK to grade 5. I had no idea that we had this in the TDSB system. She also co-facilitates a youth group for trans and gender-diverse youth from grades 6 to 9. She counsels students at the Triangle program, which is Canada's only LGBTQ alternative school, and she advocates for students across the TDSB. Do you have 36 hours in your day? I don't know. Anyway, that is just a fraction of what Gayla does. So I wanted to start off the conversation actually first with you, Cecilio. I mean, after hearing what Claire had to say as she sort of, her life progressed to transition, and then now she's a consultant around the UK. I just wondered what you could relate, or what did you hear from her that perhaps either spoke to you or didn't?
Oh yeah, no, I totally was relating with the experience. There's definitely, a slight difference in the time period that things happened. But a lot of
she's still fabulous.
Oh yeah, still fabulous. 50 and fabulous, obviously. That should be a hashtag if it isn't already. But yeah, no, totally. Like when you were talking about, Claire, of seeing, like, when you were like 11, seeing, like, learning about trans people. I have a very similar experience with Boys Don't Cry, which is, if you've seen it, spoilers, it's really, really tragic for the trans guy character in that. So I was definitely feeling parallels there, and then I was feeling parallels when you were talking about, oh my gosh, I was having all of these feelings and now I can't remember any of them.
No, but tell me though, because you were saying to me that you also knew at a very young age.
Yeah, but that's what it is. And just like with Claire, like I knew that it wasn't allowed, that there was a shame part to it, that immediately I knew that I wasn't, a girl, but I couldn't do that. And there was like all these barriers, and there was no like help about it, right? Like trans people were not the norm and weren't like celebrated.
So when was it that you decided to actually do something?
Like 3 years ago.
And then why? What happened? Like what made you change your mind?
Well, okay, so like I had just gotten through like a really big breakup, life-changing breakup, and I had started changing the group of people that I was hanging out with, and I started hanging out with the Toronto queer, like, West End scene. And those people, I met people who were like just really wonderfully exploring their gender and their sexuality, and were very open, like lots of trans people, lots of non-binary people, just like this whole group of like weird queer people who are creative. And I felt very comfortable there to finally start, just like tiptoeing around being trans. And of course my friends were super supportive. So that kind of like opened the gate. And then I went to the Sherborne Health Center for Gender Journeys in early 2015. This is when, like, already in my group of friends, I was using male pronouns and like had chosen, like, Cecilio is like my full name, but everyone calls me Cecil. It's just like, so everyone was calling me Cecil by then in my friend group. And I went to the Sherborne Gender Journeys, and there they talk to you, like it's an 11-week class, and you go every Monday. They feed you dinner, which is nice, and they talk about how to transition socially, professionally, and obviously medically. And they just run through all the steps you would have to do, and they have all these wonderful trans people come talk to you about their, like, our trans elders. And yeah, after that I felt very empowered, so I went and I told my boss, and my boss is super great. We've always had a really good connection. Like, she's a Cancer, I'm a Scorpio. So, like, we're just like always on the same level. And we've always had like really nice, deep conversations about anything, politics or like, life and stuff.
So did you find that once you started to tell people, were they supportive?
Yeah.
They were?
Yeah, like I've not had a bad experience coming out as a trans person. Because for the most part, if I don't know people, especially when I was like still like baby-faced, if they gendered me female, I would just like not say anything. If it like, like a stranger.
But on the whole, that it was a supportive community.
Yeah,
your
like my
friends,
mom
your
was so down. Like, so after I came out to my
Yeah.
boss, like I came out to my mom, and my mom was, she kind of had like a feeling because I had been introducing her to like all of my trans friends and being like, oh, and he's trans, and she's trans, and like just like she'd come out, like she lives in Mississauga, so she comes to visit me here because we have way more fun. And so I'll take her out, and like I'll bring my friend along who's trans. So like and I was just like prepping her. I'd like explain to her genderqueer, and like this is my friend who's gender, slowly building it. And then by the time I came out, well, like she's raised me, right? So I've always like was very masculine even growing up. So it wasn't a big surprise to her.
Well, it makes me think too about what Claire was saying, how names are so important, what you call people, what you want to be called. And I have to just say this because it really, just before I called Cecilio to have a conversation with him, he said, he goes, I just got off the phone with my mom. Well, tell that story, because I thought it was so, nobody else maybe would think anything of it, but you said it meant so much. You can't remember now.
Which story are you talking about now?
The story that you said, of when your mom had just called, when I had called, and you said, I just got off the phone with her, and when she calls me now, she says, hello, my son.
Yeah, she always calls me hijo, which is son in Spanish. Like it was like a really quick shift for her. Even in her text messages, she's always son, and like, and like all like the male, like, so in Spanish it's either A usually for girl, and then O for boy. Like she works really well with her language. Out of like everyone in my family, she's usually the best.
But that had great meaning. Like it's, and other people might say, well, that's, but it always makes you feel
it always
so
makes
good.
me feel good. Like, if I don't feel, like I can text my mom and like send her like a cute selfie, and then she'll tell me how handsome I am, and it's like, okay, the world's not that bad.
I want to actually bring Michelle into the conversation about what happened to you. And you were telling me that, I guess it's 2 years ago now, right? Yeah, 2 years ago, you were coming out of a meeting from work, and you got a text.
I got a text from my eldest, and it said, how's your day? And I texted back, good. And he texted back, I'm transgender. And so I immediately called him, and he was sobbing on the phone. And it was a sadness I'd never heard. And so I said, we're coming to get you. And he said, I have math. And I said, no, we're coming to get you. I'm getting Dad. We're coming to get you. And so I called my husband, Chris, and Chris came home from work. And Chris went to drive to get Noah from school. And while he did that, I called the parent support line of PFLAG and asked, what 3 things does a transgender person want to hear when they come out? And I took
How did you even have the wherewithal to call? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how would you even know to do that?
I have a gay sister, and my parents have always been supportive, and so I've had that example, and so I also knew how important it was that moment, that he was very, very vulnerable, and I needed to not mess it up, and I was very emotional, so I took notes, and I wrote down the 3 things I was going to say, and so when Noah came home, we told him we loved him. And I asked, what name do you want to use? And then I said, what pronoun do you want to use? And then I asked, what do you need from us? And he said, I need to be a boy. And then I said, we'll make that happen. And then, because I tend to be the talker of us, out of the 2 of us, and I said to Chris, don't you have anything to say? and this chokes me up to this day. He said, you're the bravest person I know, and I'm so proud to be your dad.
Nice. Nice.
And so, then I'm a librarian, and so then I researched.
Yeah, I can tell.
And I came back with a work-back plan for his transition.
A work-back plan.
Well, what I did was I said, where do I want Noah to be in 2 years? And what do we need to do to get there? And
Wait, hold. Can I just ask you, though?
Yeah.
Isn't it where he wants to be in 2 years?
Well, yeah, but it's also where I want him to be whoever he wants to be, and so I need to make that happen. And because of his age, he was 12, I knew that we were going to have to manage a lot of this.
So he was young,
Yeah.
right? He was 12. Did you think at all, okay, is this the best thing for him? Do we need to, like as a parent?
No, and a lot of people were like, and it entered into our thought, what if this is a phase? And we heard that a lot. And there was a time that we questioned that a bit. And then, we said, well, what's the most loving course of action? And the most loving course of action was to support him. And, from our research, we knew that children who do not have parental support, have very high rates of suicide and high rates of depression. And we knew that we had the power to help Noah to be whoever he wanted to be, and that we were going to do that.
Was it, when he texted you, was that a shock?
Yeah, I was stunned.
So you had no clue?
I had no clue. And I think a lot of that was, like, our other son, Will, did dance, Noah did hockey. So I consider myself a feminist. We weren't trying to have gender stereotypes in our house. So when he would do typically male things, I didn't think anything of it. Or when he would dress in male clothes, I just thought, that's an unfortunate fashion choice. Like, I didn't think anything of it. I did think that maybe he was a lesbian, but I didn't think trans. And then after he said it, everything made sense. So then my husband and I, we took Noah down to a hairdresser on Church Street called Hose, and as they cut off his hair, because he had really long hair, I could see this light go on, and I knew that we were on the right path. So we walked in with a daughter, and we came out of the salon using male pronouns, and on the Monday, he went to school as Noah, and I was on the phone with the school, and initially we were encouraged to move schools, and we spoke to Noah about that, and he had a great group of friends, and we basically said, well, they're going to get on board. And so we had multiple meetings. We had a transition, an accommodation plan. We met Gayla through that. And, we had deadlines, and we approached this as it was the most important thing in our lives, because it was. And so both my husband and I were at every meeting. We took notes. We had minutes, and yeah.
So can I ask you, because it was interesting what Claire was saying, how people would say, well, have you changed your football team? Or, but I'm still that same person. Was Noah the same person, or was he at all different in any way?
I always thought that he didn't have much of a sense of humor, and now I realize that he was sad. Like now he always had trouble with friends, and I was always worried about that. And now he has like this group of friends, and he's just this social butterfly, and he has a confidence that he never had, and yeah, he's just blossomed, and it's just been such a gift to see him become who he really is.
Gayla, I just wanted to ask you about the young group, the young children who you support, because I guess they're as young as what, 4, 5?
4 would be.
4,
or,
yeah.
or
Can you talk about that? Can you talk, because can you talk about that?
Sure, about the little kids. So
about the group, what happens?
Sure. So this group has been running for a number of years. It's called the Gender Independent Group. The name Gender Independent came as a grassroots term actually from parents who were trying to describe this continuum of identities that and expressions their kids were sort of experiencing around gender. So we have kids in the group who are like fully transitioning, but then there's also kids who are like boys who like to wear dresses that aren't really challenging their gender identity, but it's more around gender expression, and so they come up with different issues at school. Or we have kids who sort of identify as non-binary or agender, or they don't fit and they use other language that makes sense for little kids.
They don't even know those definitions.
So I have grade 1 students that are using the term non-binary. It's becoming
at 4?
At grade 1. I've had some grade 1 students, but so 6-year-olds,
really? Huh.
And so I think there's a couple things. There's the families that come to group, right, that are very affirming parents and or are ready to be on a journey to kind of support their kids. And so we're recognizing that more and more, kind of like what Michelle was saying, we need to provide spaces and support to parents and caregivers and guardians who can really sort of affirm these children's identity early on, because we see that people cope a lot better when they're in loving environments, right? And then a lot of the families that would maybe sort of not be as supportive or rejecting. The nice thing about my role is I can go all over the school board, so we can still kind of support kids locally at their school. And so sometimes we're working with schools around providing that sort of supportive environment. And that's where the Ontario Human Rights Code is really, really helpful, because gender identity and gender expression rights actually belong to the individual, not to the parent. So if we have a kid that shows up at school, even at young ages, and says, hey, I identify with this, I want to use this pronoun or no pronoun, please call me by this name. Even if the parents aren't in on it and they don't want their parents to know, we have an obligation under the code to uphold those rights of the individual, even the child. I've been completely privileged and honored to work with such a vast array of families and kids.
And is the group fluid? Like, do people come in, like, do kids come and go? They're there for a bit, they might be there. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a monthly group. We have a parent group in one room and then the kids group in another group. And the kids group is really like a therapeutic play space where it's explicitly named. Like, they talk about, like, this is the gender independent group, what is gender? And so kids have really cute answers. Everybody gets to sort of pick their name and pronoun, which may or may not go with how they sort of, explore the outside world. So lots of kids try stuff on in group. And then they get to play and not be sort of subject to sort of the gender binary, the idea of there's just boys and girls in this world, and it's a very rigid piece. And then for parents, we're looking more at, themes around clinical support. So last night, for example, we had our group, and we were talking mostly about referral sources and, like, where they can go for support for various issues in the city, and also puberty. Like, there's a bunch of families already thinking about puberty ahead and how are they going to manage these conversations and how are they going to talk to the kids about their changing bodies. And, our puberty books aren't very good right now because they're very, very either like, this is a girl's body, this is a boy's body, and they're like, this is not a conversation for my kids, right?
You know, you said something, so I thought it was so interesting when we chatted on the phone, and it was that what you've observed is that these children, they're not confused. They don't have an issue with themselves. It's everything around them that makes them confused.
For sure, if you grow up and all the messages around you are that you're supposed to be a certain way, and that's not what your psychological sense of self is, you know, I find once kids actually come out, it's everyone else around them that needs to catch up, is kind of my experience. And the other piece too is we also have to be open that when kids are really young, sometimes they are exploring, like not all kids persist with their identities.
So they may come and then...
And some things may shift, and so with parents, you have to be open to, it's like any other shifting identity that would be part of your child, right? They may be, when they're 3 years old, they may be like, I am going to be, you know, a hockey player when I grow up, and there's nothing that's gonna stop me at 3. And then, you know, by the time they're 6, they may have a different shift in how they see themselves later in the world. This may not be the best analogy right now, but but you know, like there's different parts of people, and I think Claire was talking about that. There's the whole person. Gender is just one little piece of the pie, and yes, it interacts with all kinds of parts of who that person is. But there's so much more. So it's really about working with parents about this idea of affirmation. So we're really working from a gender affirmative care model. So we talk a lot about affirmation in our groups. Even in the youth group I run, it's all about affirming who you are in the moment, and like how do we get affirmation, and for parents to work in this area is so important. And it's beyond support, right? You can support or you can accept, but affirming is taking it to another level. It's really saying, like, you know, I love you, son, right?
Yeah. Well, Cecilio, I mean, I'm assuming there was nothing like this, right, when you were going through the education, right? So what was it like for you in the early years, and then going through, you know, high school?
Right.
Yeah, before OCAD, like.
Oh yeah, pre-OCAD.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't fit in with the boys. I didn't fit in with the girls because I wasn't sporty, so the boys didn't like me, and then the girls didn't know what to do with me because I didn't dress like the girls. I always liked wearing my cousin's hand-me-downs, which were boys. I still remember my Chicago Bulls starter jacket. It was the best in the 90s. But yeah, hand-me-downs were my favorite thing because they were my cousins. Yeah, so grade school I had like a very small group of friends that I could hang out with, but we didn't talk about gender identity. We were just kind of like together because we were not included by the rest of the grade school. And then high school was better because it was a bigger population of people, and I started reading Harry Potter, and Harry Potter saved my life, and I kind of...
It saved your life?
Oh yeah, Harry Potter for sure. One of the first, yeah, anyways, it made me start reading, it made me start, you know, being critical of like the media, and it kind of like spiraled me into this world that I am in now. But luckily I had Harry Potter, and Harry Potter was this like big part of who I was, and I just became like kind of like an agendered like geek. I didn't call myself agendered, but like I definitely tried my best to just like identify as like this nerdy person, and I was in band, and like I just had like I was a part of a lot of things, but like my gender wasn't really a part of like.
But was that out of a choice, or was it a default kind of thing? Like
it was kind of like a default. It was just easier not to deal with any of that stuff than like having to deal with it. Like I didn't dress like overtly feminine. I went to Catholic school, so we either had the skirt, like a kilt or khaki pants. I only ever wore the khaki pants. But yeah, like I didn't really, like no one, I don't think anybody knew what to do with me, like dating wise, so I didn't really date in high school. I dated, but at like my workplace, I worked at McDonald's, and there I was kind of sexualized, which was weird, but like not at school. Anyways, continuing on. But yeah, like at school, I just like kind of really focused on becoming a nerd, and then learned how to like make movies in my CommTech class, and that has continued. And yeah.
So Michelle, with your son, what was the school experience then like for Noah?
Well, right now he's at an amazing school,
But he changed then.
But yeah, he's in high school now. But initially, I called up the guidance counselor, and the school had never had anyone out, like at all. And they had never done any sort of education around, not just even around gender, but about like any differences. So we were in the position of having to educate the school. And because there was a lack of education, there was also a lack of understanding that some of these things weren't choices. Like Noah having his own bathroom is not a choice. You're not giving him a bathroom. He has a right to that. He has you're not being, you have to use the right pronoun. It's not optional. So there was a lot of meetings, and it was difficult because some of the other parents were going to the school and complaining. Because when Noah came out, some other kids started identifying and saying, maybe that's me too. And so I think that created a situation for the principal where he was trying to keep two families happy. And what we made it very clear was that's not optional. Like, these are rights. These are not, choices. You have to follow this. Mm-hmm. And, you have to follow the accommodation plan. Noah had a rough time because we wanted the school to bring in education, because the kids who knew him from elementary school knew him as a girl. And then he shows up at school, says, my name is Noah, I'm a boy. And there's no explanation to the kids about him changing. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of, cruelty, but it came out of ignorance, because the kids didn't understand that he wasn't doing something for attention or, dressing strange. It was his identity. And so once I think they got teach to come in a group to talk to the kids, things got better. But it was challenging for him. But he had an amazing group of friends, and so we had debated maybe moving him, and so we had sat him down and asked, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want to stay at that school." And so we were like, "Well, we're going to make it a place where you're comfortable. And we're gonna work on that." And that's actually how we met Gayla. It was because Gayla came to many of our meetings, and it was by the time he left, he really had changed that school, and made it better for other kids who come after him.
Yeah, and then it must have been early on then that you approached Skylark, right, to start this tween group.
One of the things when Noah came out, I knew that, we could help him, with finding doctors, and we could help him at home, and we could help manage the school. But the one thing where my husband and I would never be able to do is understand what it feels like to be trans, and understand what it feels like to be the only kid out at your school. And so I took a couple days off, and I went to every program in Toronto and spoke to people. And they were all very welcoming, and said, "Oh, well, Noah can come." And then I asked, "What's the average age of the kids who come?" And it was usually 16 to 24. And I had a 12-year-old, and there's no way I'm going to send my 12-year-old to a group that's not age appropriate. And I think too, because with the curriculum change, kids have the language now to describe who they are, because they're learning what transgender is. So, and we actually are in one of the gig groups that Gayla runs. And I was hearing this from other parents that, there really wasn't a place for kids to go and meet other kids. So I set up a meeting with Skylark, and I came in and said, there's a gap here that needs to be filled, and presented my research and said, if you put on a program where kids can come and hang out and just drop in for kids and for friends and their allies, because I wanted kids who were not yet out to be able to have that space. I committed that my husband and I would fundraise for it, and we would make sure that they had the money to run it. Mm. And so then that's how we came out to a lot of people. It was as a family. We wrote a letter to a lot of our friends, and we said, this is something that we're doing for Noah, but Noah is part of a community, and we need to make we need to think beyond Noah, because that Noah's community if Noah's community succeeds, then Noah succeeds.
Yeah. Gail, I hear the term allies a lot being used. Well, how do you define an ally?
It's a good question, as that's how I often define myself. I think it means different things. I think it's about there's that idea that I think it's about identifying like where your identities are at and being able to actually like use them to help others. So I often think about this around when I'm advocating just for like washrooms for, someone needing access to an all-gender washroom. And it's like, I can't tell you how many of my trans colleagues or kids that I work with that are often just like, I'm tired of being the one to have the bathroom fight. It's just really nice if someone else can do it for me, right? Or sometimes it's those moments where it's even something simple, like most of our workshops, they're not always about gender identity. I do a lot of staff training as well, but like we start them all with names and pronouns. And I remember it's like sometimes you even question yourself, it's like, why am I always doing names and pronouns? Like I know it's around self-identification, this doesn't connect with anything I'm doing, then I still have to have the whole like pronoun explanation about self-identification, why we do it. But there was one day that really struck me. I was in a staff meeting in an area of the city that like, not downtown, not super diverse at all. And a staff member came up to me after and said, I really appreciated that you started this PD session with this because I didn't have to use a pronoun and I didn't have to use my name. And I'm actually identifying as someone else outside of my place of work. And you actually provided an opening for me here. And I can't tell you how much that meant to me. And it was like this moment of like, okay, that's a moment of allyship, right? Like sometimes even when you're not doing it. And I have to say this work has completely changed like how I even navigate my own personal life now, because to the point where I went to a community consultation about a new community center being built, and I'm like, and they were asking for feedback, and I was like, where are all gender change rooms? And it can't just be family change rooms, because not everyone who is, transitioning or, is gender diverse feels comfortable going into a family change room. That's not always appropriate, right? And so they're like, oh, no one else has brought this up. And I'm like, this is very sad that no one brought this up, but I'm glad that, and I don't know if I would have done that, 8 years ago before I really had gotten so deep into this work.
What do you see right now as being like the main issues in the educational system regarding transgender individuals and others?
Honestly, I think it comes down to every individual. There's no single story, right? And so every individual has different experiences and different needs, and so I think some of the stuff is really basic that was covered here today. Pronouns and misgendering people. Some people I don't even think realize like the damage it causes kids. It's the blatant transphobia and the rigid gender stereotypes that still quite exist and are very, very strong.
Can I just ask you, so when you talk about transphobia and, well, how much do you think is intentional and how much do you think is ignorance? Maybe ignorance is a strong word, but not being aware, or do you know how?
I don't know if I can evaluate it. It's kind of like I work in a very, very large school system, and our school system, the more I think about it, it's like I've heard once a quote that like our schools are mirrors of our communities. And so when I think about the TDS, like our large system, it's like our system is really a reflection of our society. And so, it's kind of like, so it's like kind of asking me like what's going on in society, and I'm just thinking
from your own personal, like, well, let me ask Michelle, because it's a very personal experience. What have you noticed with the people around you? How much is? Yeah.
I think probably 80% is just not knowing, and I would say maybe 20% is hatred. But what we've found is that, and I tell Noah this, is that when somebody makes a mistake with misgendering you or something like that, it's an opportunity to educate and to turn somebody into an ally. And you need to leave room for them to change, because especially for in our neighborhood, like my son is like the only LGBTQ kid a lot of people know. And so when he first came out, they did make mistakes, but, we talked about, that's what you don't, like, about pronouns, and people really changed, and people, like our church, for example, like all these senior citizens, every time it comes, hi Noah, they put up an all-gender washroom, like the week that we said,
So your church was very supportive.
Yeah, and so, we've gotten support from places I didn't always think we would.
I just want to make a comment. I think there is still quite a bit of transphobia going on. And when I think about the individuals that I work with, it is, you're very fortunate for the kids who end up in sort of loving families like Michelle's. Like, I don't think this is every story, sadly. I wish it was. And so there's the family rejection. Then I also think there's the peer issues that kids are dealing with, and just even the daily stuff they even get from teachers that are saying things that are hurtful. Sometimes people don't do it intentionally, but oftentimes people do. And I see the way, like, I navigate even my job compared to my trans colleague, and how that person has to navigate their job. And it's like, we don't experience the same things. Even with like human resource issues and things like that. Like there's a lot of privilege from where I'm sitting. And so it's like some of the stuff, it's like even our systems are kind of set up to be discriminatory. And I know we're trying to make some changes, but it's slow, and there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, Cecilio, I mean, you give these workshops to faculty, right?
Yeah.
What have you noticed about when you give these workshops to the teachers?
Well, the teachers, it's not mandatory to go to these trans inclusivity or there's two trains. There's positive space, which is like sexuality stuff, and then there's the trans gender nonconforming two-spirited inclusivity training. So I run that one with my co-facilitator Onar, and the teachers that come are, we're kind of like just preaching to the choir. These are the teachers who already have seen trans students or, have like family members in the LGBTQ community. So these are teachers that are usually like kind of with it, but just need guidance in like supporting their students more. But when we talk to them, they tell us about, the faculty that actually need to come to this, who never will. And then that's the problem, right? Is they can create this wonderful space for their students where they'll feel safe. And we actually, I think the best people that we trained were the people from the student union, the CCSI, and they all work in the gym. And those people, I'm terrified of gyms in general, just because of change rooms, and then like it's so gendered. But the way they're like managing that space, like the manager and like all her coworkers were there. Their policy is right now if a trans person comes, if they say that they're trans, you ask them what change room would you like? Do you want the men's, the women's, or the?
You offer them the choice.
Yeah, they offer them the choice, and then that person chooses. And let's just say it's they're a trans woman, they go into the women's change room because that's their right. If someone were to come to them, like a cis woman, come and be like having a problem, then that person gets segregated into the single stall change room. So that's what they're doing, right? The person with the problem gets gets their own little room, not the trans person, because they're fun. So yeah, like it's great that that's happening, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'll go into a change room. I still haven't.
Well, as far as like, maybe this isn't let me ask it anyway. Okay, so as far as your school goes, how progressive, how inclusive do you find it?
Yeah. Well, like I work, so when we so Centennial's big. There's a lot of campuses. Yeah. I work at the smallest campus, Story Arts Center, and it's all the artsy people, right? So like my campus is pretty chill in compared to others. Like I couldn't imagine how like police fundamentals is. None of them have come for inclusivity training or positive space.
Do you think it should be mandatory?
Oh my
Have they
gosh,
thought about
that'd be
making
great.
it mandatory?
The thing is, there's a lot of problems because like people can say like for religious reasons they don't want to do it. There's like tons of reasons why they say like no, that can't be mandatory. And I don't like I'm not that type. I have just a bachelor in fine arts. I don't know how to do that. But like we're hoping to like somewhat make it more mandatory. But at least we have some teachers that are there, and I always remind them that they are our champions, they are the role models, they set the tone for everything, to please call out staff or call in, or like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
really trying to empower them, to let them know that, I think, who was saying, you were saying how, like, you know, if you can relieve like some of the bathroom issue, like just, you know, tackling on these, like one teacher was helping a student for 6 weeks to finally get a preferred name on their like student ID, because we don't have a preferred name thing yet at Centennial. George Brown has it, a few other colleges have it, but we don't. But this teacher, you know, was like, don't worry about it, I'm gonna do this for you. Because, you know, the student is like
Yeah.
already dealing with everything
You know
else.
what, like as far as from your experiences, if there was maybe one next step, one thing that could be implemented, like what would you like to see for a more inclusive environment? Just to start, just
Right.
yeah.
Well, like it'd be nice for everyone to come, like that, you know, the trans inclusivity or just positive space for it to be mandatory would be a great place to start. And then like redoing bathrooms in general, because they're all just like, even if there is a gender neutral bathroom, it's usually like hidden away, you know? So it's never like included. Like I would love to see bathrooms just become like stalls, like all single stalls. And then like maybe there's
Yeah,
a
because we
communal
have
plate.
that already in places.
Yeah,
someplaces,
yeah. When
right?
I go to bars, it's
and-
just
yeah,
like
exactly,
it's just like 2 or 3
Yeah.
rooms where you can just go do your thing. I would love to see that like
Okay,
everywhere.
Okay, let me stop, because I know we're almost out of
Oh,
time.
yeah,
Can I just
sorry.
go around to the other? No, if there was, so for you, Gail, if there was maybe one next thing, a change that could happen that you'd like to see within the TDSB, what would that be?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think an all gender accessible washroom in every school. Can I add and like a real focus on folks not misgendering people? And I think I'm just in a place right now where a bunch of my students I've been working with have been really, really impacted emotionally because of the misgendering. And so and I mean, we do a lot of training even with the people who aren't volunteering. And so it's like training isn't always enough. You need that allyship and mentoring. So yeah, so I guess all gender accessible washrooms in every school mandated, and meaningful training around people understanding pronouns and preferred names.
What about for you, Michelle?
I think that it's understanding that you have to work on the school culture, that having an inclusive, welcoming environment is not going to happen without work. And you need to be actively working to make sure that that happens. And you need to be taking action when things happen that hurt that culture.
Okay. All right. I think we have time just for maybe a few questions. So Claire, can I ask you to come back up? And if anyone has any questions related to the topic tonight, any aspect about education or, sure, yeah, go on. Thanks.
I'm just wondering what kind of advice you might offer to educators that want to have this conversation in their classroom but don't really know where to start or when to start.
Gayla, do you want to start? Yeah.
Sure. So you probably have stuff too, but I mean, there's so many great books out now. It's just an easy sort of segue. There's also that, I mean, we're really fortunate in Toronto. We have some great writers who are actually doing stuff and featuring gender independent kids or gender diverse kids in positive ways, not just like, here's a kid who's different and then experienced horrible, harassment and discrimination. So now we have lots of positive stories. So it's just opening the conversation with more positive representation, more possibility models for kids too, right? Just that there's lots of different ways to be, and here's tons of options, and also helping them learn to build empathy, that not everyone is just like you, and even if you can't relate to this person, that doesn't matter because they're a person, and we should learn how to just respect people. So I think there's lots of great entry points, just starting with some really amazing books that are coming out. And that's often a starting point that a lot of teachers, I think, are picking up in the primary grades. And as it goes over in adolescence, I've seen teachers do incredible things in their classrooms, and there's lots of great resources and activities that folks can recommend.
Claire, can you add anything? Is there anything you can add to that?
Yeah, I'll just then say the physical environment as well. So there are those subtle messages that exist around the building. So for example, around Trafalgar Square in London, they have crossing points for pedestrians, and they have same-sex crossing points. So rather than just a green figure, you have the gay couple, lesbian couple, heterosexual couple, but there's also a transgender symbol as well. And I've got a photograph of myself stood underneath the transgender symbol. The people, I just thought, no, she's a strange tourist. But it's those little symbols like that that also make a difference, because as young people, they will look around their environment and they're trying to work out if they are accepted or not. So there are books, there are obviously different activities that you can then do. The training is absolutely key, because I think as educators, and for all of us here, we have to be aware of our own subconscious or internal bias that exists. And also, where does that internal bias then come from? And I know that as I then step out into the outside world, what I am doing every single time I step out is I am resetting the stereotype button that people may have about trans people. I mean, I don't know what your stereotype is that exists in your head, and, you know, maybe what were you expecting of me? But now, after tonight, you'll walk away and you may then think about a whole host of different things, what we've then talked about. And that's you just changing your stereotype, which means that you will interact with people in a different way the next time, you know, you maybe meet a trans person. So there's an awful lot that we can then do. You just can't give up. It's promote understanding and tackle prejudice.
Yeah, do you have a question?
Just a question. And Gayla, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you see the impacts on students when they are misgendered or when they're not understood. And I know you've talked a bit about this, you did too, Claire, about, you know, suicide and depression and things like that. But I'm wondering if you can describe a bit more fully what the impacts are on children that you see when they're not understood in school.
So it's a couple things. So I would say, so children and youth. So let's start with family. So if families sort of reject kids or youth, sadly I end up working with kids who are completely street involved, are living in youth shelters, have been kicked out of their home. And these are young kids who've tried to come out, there's nowhere else to be. So that's one part of the story. You also see kids who, I have some young people who maybe engage in self-harm or have lots of suicidal thoughts or actually feel suicidal. And sometimes misgendering is one of the triggers that starts with that, because it symbolizes so much else that's going on for them. Sometimes it leads to substance use. For little kids, it can be a whole bunch of things. Sometimes it is suicidal ideation, but in different ways. And sometimes it's like I've seen increase in behavioral problems, right? Because kids often sort of show how they feel. They can't always tell you, right? So they show you through their behaviors and actions. So you can see a whole gamut of things. I think with the little kid population, what I often see is that kids, even with really supportive families, I find kids oftentimes are really transitioning schools. I'm seeing a little bit less than what I saw 5 years ago, but I find kids are transitioning schools. So what does it mean that you have to switch schools because things aren't going well for you? It means that's a decrease in school attachment, right? Because you're always moving around, you're not building those long-term relationships like you would at another school. So we see lots of different things from sort of really extreme, and there's no single story, right? So these are kind of some examples, but yeah, you see lots of impacts. So I'm at the point now where it's even if you don't get it, just do it, because it means the world to someone else.
Thank you. All right. I think that's it, because I think we might even be a bit over time now. So I'm just going to wrap it up. I want to thank the panel. I just hope, and I really feel that this creates more awareness, more understanding. Thank you so much. It crossed my mind too, and I think, Claire, you sort of hinted at this, that it's risky. It's risky coming out to talk, and you never know whether there's more to lose than to gain when you talk, in public. So I really appreciate all of you for coming out and sharing your personal experiences with all of us. Thank you.